You were not interrupted by this message by accident. You were intercepted. Because what if the life you keep calling ordinary is not ordinary at all, but coded, layered, quietly carrying weight you were never taught how to recognize? Chosen one, listen. The moments you dismiss as routine, the conversations you almost ignore, the tasks you perform on autopilot, they are not filler scenes between real purpose. They are the delivery system. You have been waiting for a God-sized dream to arrive with thunder, with spectacle, with a moment so undeniable, it would silence every doubt inside you. But what if the dream never needed to arrive because it was embedded, hidden in plain sight, woven into your days, disguised as repetition? That restlessness you feel when everything looks fine on the surface, that quiet dissatisfaction that refuses to leave you alone, that sense that your life is brushing against something deeper but never quite naming it, that is not confusion. That is recognition without language. You are sensing breadcrumbs, not chaos, signals, not noise, a design that does not shout because it expects maturity to notice it. And the reason this has felt frustrating, even painful, is because you were taught to look for purpose somewhere else, somewhere higher, louder, more dramatic, while the divine was whispering through your everyday reality the entire time. Not to tease you, to train you, because a God-sized dream cannot rest on a person who only recognizes God in extremes. It must be carried by someone who can see eternity hiding inside the ordinary. And that is why you are here. Not because you are behind, not because you missed it, but because you are finally ready to see that your destiny has been speaking to you through the life you are already living. That last truth still hangs in the air. Your destiny has been speaking through the life you are already living. And if that is true, then the ache you carry needs to be re-examined. Chosen one, that restlessness you feel is not a flaw in your gratitude. It is not proof that you are ungrounded, entitled, or spiritually immature. It is not a sign that you are broken or unfaithful to the life you have been given. It is a signal. You feel it when the room goes quiet, when the day ends and nothing went wrong, yet something inside you still stirs. When you ask yourself why success, stability, or approval never fully satisfies. When your soul keeps leaning forward even when your life looks settled. That ache is not demanding escape. It is announcing proximity. Because longing does not show up where nothing is forming. Hunger only appears where nourishment exists. Thirst only rises where water is near. You were taught to interpret that sensation as lack, as impatience, as discontent. But what if it is recognition without permission? What if your spirit senses the weight of a God-sized dream nearby, but your mind was trained to dismiss it because it doesn't look dramatic enough yet? Chosen one, people without calling do not ache like this. They numb, they distract, they settle into routine without question. But you cannot fully settle no matter how hard you try. You can comply, perform, even succeed, yet something inside you keeps tapping the glass, whispering that this is not the full measure of what you were shaped to carry. That is not arrogance. That is alignment approaching consciousness. The mistake was believing that longing means distance, that if you were truly walking in purpose, the ache would disappear. But purpose does not remove longing, it refines it. The closer you get, the sharper the sensation becomes, because what is forming now requires your attention, not your escape. This is why your ache doesn't point you outward. It doesn't tell you to abandon your life. It doesn't demand a new identity or a dramatic reinvention. It hovers, it waits, it insists quietly, because the dream you are brushing against is not elsewhere. It is layered inside what you already touch every day, and that is unsettling, because it means you cannot blame distance anymore. You cannot say, "One day when I arrive." You cannot postpone responsibility by calling your current life temporary. If the ache is a clue, then your everyday environment is the classroom. Your relationships are not distractions. Your routines are not delays. They are pressure points revealing where weight is being added. Chosen one, the ache is not asking you to run faster. It is asking you to see deeper. To stop treating your longing like a problem to solve and start treating it like a compass recalibrating you from the inside. Because the God-sized dream does not announce itself with fireworks. It announces itself with tension, with a sense that something matters more than you were told, with an inability to fully disappear into normalcy, with a quiet refusal to live small even when small would be easier. And the moment you stop trying to silence that ache, the moment you stop apologizing for it, it stops feeling like dissatisfaction and starts feeling like direction. Not toward somewhere else, but toward what has been patiently waiting for you to recognize its weight. That direction you just felt did not point outward. It pointed back into the life you are already standing inside. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. Because you were trained to expect revelation to arrive as interruption, a mountaintop moment, a dramatic calling that shatters routine and announces itself with unmistakable force. You were taught that if it were truly divine, it would be obvious, unmissable, impossible to confuse with normal life. But chosen one, that expectation has quietly blinded you. The divine does not always interrupt the ordinary. Sometimes it inhabits it so fully that you mistake presence for familiarity. You have been waiting for a moment that would excuse you from your current reality when the design was to initiate you through it. Because spectacle awakens attention, but repetition builds capacity. And a God-sized dream cannot rest on someone who only responds to intensity. It must be carried by someone who can remain faithful inside monotony, who can discern meaning without needing noise to announce it. That is why your life did not explode into clarity. It organized itself instead. Same streets, same responsibilities, same patterns repeating with subtle variations. Not because nothing is happening, but because everything is happening under the surface. You were not meant to escape your routines. You were meant to see through them. Chosen one, the mundane is not the opposite of the sacred. It is the camouflage. Purpose disguised itself as habit so it could grow without being hijacked by ego, without being distorted by performance, without being rushed before you were ready to carry its weight. That job you call just a job, that relationship you label ordinary, that season you describe as nothing special, they are not empty spaces between callings, they are the training ground. Because revelation that arrives too early feels exciting, but revelation that matures slowly becomes unshakable. You were not denied a mountaintop. You were assigned a field, and fields do not announce harvest on day one. They require patience, repetition, and trust in unseen processes. This is why you feel both close and confused. Why something feels important without being loud. Why you sense depth without spectacle. You are not missing the moment, you are inside it. But the moment does not look like what you were taught to expect. Chosen one, the myth was never that God speaks loudly. The myth was that he only speaks that way. And believing that myth kept you waiting for permission when the invitation was already embedded in your days. Every small responsibility that keeps showing up. Every challenge that refuses to resolve quickly. Every task that seems beneath the grandeur you imagine. They are not insults to your calling. They are safeguards, because the dream you carry is not fragile, but you were. So it learned how to hide until your perception matured. This is the inversion you must accept. The more ordinary it looks, the more likely it is doing real work on you. And once you stop demanding fireworks, once you stop postponing belief until the presentation improves, you begin to notice something unsettling. The same patterns repeating, the same themes circling back, the same lessons refusing to release you. Not because you failed them, but because they are foundational. Chosen one revelation is not always an event. Sometimes it is a slow recognition that your life has been answering a question you didn't know how to ask yet. And the day you stop waiting for the extraordinary is the day the extraordinary begins to reveal that it has been living inside your ordinary all along. That realization from before still lingers. The extraordinary has been living inside your ordinary. And once you accept that, something unsettling begins to happen. You start noticing patterns you used to dismiss, moments that feel connected but were never labeled as such, encounters that arrive with strange timing, words spoken by strangers that land too precisely to be ignored. At first you tell yourself it's coincidence. You've been trained to do that, to flatten meaning so you don't have to respond to it. But chosen one coincidence is a comfortable word. It protects you from implication. Because if nothing is random, then your life is not neutral. And if your life is not neutral, then you are already involved. Here's the truth: most people never slow down enough to confront the divine, rarely announces direction with commands. It trains recognition instead. You are not given a map. You are taught how to read terrain. That is why the signals arrive small. Why they feel personal? Why they only make sense once you're already inside the moment. A thought that won't leave you alone. A repeated theme that keeps resurfacing across years. A door that closes only to redirect you somewhere eerily aligned. These are not interruptions, they are calibrations. Chosen one, if purpose arrived as spectacle, you would admire it without embodying it. But when it arrives as pattern, you are forced to participate. This is the shift you are undergoing right now. Your awareness is being trained. Because once you start seeing alignment, you cannot unsee responsibility. You realize that the same situations keep finding you, the same kinds of people, the same moral crossroads, not because you are stuck, but because you are being shaped. Randomness does not repeat itself with precision. Design does. And the reason these signals were subtle is because subtlety reveals readiness. Anyone can respond to thunder. Few can respond to whispers without ego rushing in to distort the message. Chosen one, this is why your confirmations didn't arrive as declarations. They arrived as resonance. You felt them in your body before you trusted them with your mind. A quiet yes, a wait, a sense of inevitability without explanation. That is not fantasy. That is alignment being registered internally before language catches up. And the more you resist this, the louder the signals become, not to overwhelm you, but to break through denial. Because once you recognize the pattern, you can no longer pretend your choices are isolated. Every decision now carries echo. Every response reinforces or resists the architecture being formed. This is why awakening does not feel euphoric for long. It feels sobering, because recognition replaces innocence. You realize your life has been speaking to you in symbols and repetitions, in moments that refuse to be dismissed as meaningless. And the question is no longer, is this real? The question becomes, what am I going to do now that I see it? Chosen one, the signs were never meant to entertain you. They were meant to enlist you, not into perfection, into participation. The divine does not override your agency, it invites it. That is why the signals stop short of certainty. Why they leave space for choice. Why they require courage to honor. Because the moment you name them as intentional, you step out of observer mode. You become accountable. And this is the quiet threshold most people turn back from. They enjoy noticing patterns, but they hesitate to let those patterns demand change. But you are still here, still listening, still leaning forward, which means something in you already knows that these are not random moments brushing past you. They are breadcrumbs placed just close enough together to lead you somewhere without dragging you there. And the more you honor them, the clearer the architecture becomes. Not louder, clearer. Because the purpose unfolding in your life is not trying to impress you. It is trying to shape you into someone who can carry what comes next without needing constant confirmation. Chosen one, the signals have done their job. You see now. And seeing is the point of no return. You feel that threshold now, don't you? That quiet line you crossed the moment you admitted this isn't random. Once you see the pattern, the moments that follow change their tone. Because synchronicities do not arrive to amaze you. They arrive to confirm you. You were taught to think of them as bonuses. Little cosmic nods meant to comfort you when you feel uncertain. But chosen one, that interpretation keeps them small. Synchronicities are not gifts, they are receipts. They show up when alignment has already begun, not to initiate the path, but to verify that you are walking it. That is why they often appear after a decision, after an inner shift, after you quietly choose integrity over convenience, truth over comfort, attention over distraction. And they don't shout, they click. A phrase you've been wrestling with appears in a book you didn't plan to open. A conversation answers a question you hadn't spoken aloud yet. A door opens the moment you stop forcing another one. Not miracles, confirmations. Chosen one. This is where many misunderstand the signal. They wait for synchronicities to tell them what to do when their real function is to affirm what you already knew but were afraid to trust. That's why they feel intimate, tailored, almost uncomfortably precise. They speak the language of recognition, not instruction. And here is the part that matters. Synchronicities increase when you act in alignment, and they fade when you resist it. Not as punishment, as feedback. Because once alignment is established, the training shifts. You are no longer being woken up. You are being refined, This is why the aha moments started small. Tiny confirmations woven into normal days. Because the point was never to convince your mind. It was to condition your trust. Chosen one, people who chase signs remain dependent. People who honor them mature. And maturity is required for what you're approaching. Think about it. The moments that stand out in your memory are not the loudest ones. They're the ones that arrived quietly and landed deeply. The ones that felt like, of course, I knew this. That knowing is the signal. Synchronicity is simply reality agreeing with the direction your integrity has already chosen, which is why treating them as entertainment dilutes their power. They are not there to be collected. They are there to be responded to. Each one asks a silent question. Will you trust this alignment enough to live differently now? Because confirmation without embodiment becomes indulgence. And the divine does not indulge. It prepares. Chosen one, this is why the synchronicities in your life are increasing in relevance, not spectacle. They're not getting louder. They're getting closer, touching decisions, intersecting relationships, affecting timing. They are no longer abstract reassurance. They are directional pressure, which means the season of being gently nudged is ending. You are being trusted now, trusted to discern without needing constant affirmation, trusted to move without needing applause from the universe. Because a God-sized dream cannot be carried by someone who needs to be convinced at every step. So notice the synchronicities, honor them, but do not idolize them. They are not the destination, they are the echo. Proof that when you choose alignment, reality reorganizes just enough to let you know you're not imagining the weight you feel. And the more you live in that alignment, the less you'll need signs to tell you who you are becoming. Because eventually your life itself becomes the confirmation. That last truth settles heavily. Eventually your life itself becomes the confirmation. And once you understand that, something shifts inside you, because awareness is no longer optional. Up to now, noticing signs felt almost passive. Something that happened to you. Moments you stumbled into and quietly treasured. But chosen one, that season is closing. The more alignment you taste, the more responsibility it demands. Because awareness is not a gift you admire. It is a faculty you must steward. You are being asked to stop waiting for meaning to announce itself and begin meeting it halfway. This is where resistance shows up. Not loud resistance, subtle resistance. The kind that says, I see it, but I don't want to change my pace. I recognize the pattern, but I'm not ready to rearrange my priorities. I feel the pull, but I'd rather keep my life manageable. Chosen one, this is the tension point, because heightened perception exposes misalignment faster than comfort can keep up. Once you see clearly, you feel the drag of what no longer fits. Old habits start to feel heavier. Certain conversations feel hollow. Distractions lose their sweetness. Not because they became wrong, but because you outgrew them. Awareness sharpens consequence. This is why many people unconsciously dull their perception again. They scroll, they numb, they stay busy, not because they don't believe, but because belief without adjustment is exhausting. But you didn't awaken to remain unchanged. You awakened to participate, and participation begins with attention. Chosen one, notice where your attention goes when you are alone. Notice what consistently drains you. Notice what quietly energizes you without demanding recognition. These are not preferences, they are indicators. The divine does not shout instructions, it trains sensitivity. Because a God-sized dream cannot be managed through force, it must be navigated through attunement. This is why your life is asking more questions now, not verbally, through friction. Where do you feel pressure? Where do you feel resistance inside yourself? Where do you keep sensing almost but not quite? These are awareness drills, not tests of worthiness, tests of honesty. Chosen one. The moment you admit what you already see, clarity accelerates. Because denial slows alignment more than ignorance ever could. You don't need new information. You need courage to live what's already been revealed. And this is where responsibility quietly enters the room. Not responsibility to perform. Responsibility to respond. To stop pretending you don't notice the invitations. To stop treating insight as something that belongs to the future. Because awareness that isn't embodied becomes pressure. And pressure eventually turns into frustration. That's why this phase feels heavier, not darker. heavier. You are not being punished. You are being trusted with more perception, and trust always comes with weight. Chosen one, awareness is the bridge between seeing and becoming. And bridges are not places to camp. They are crossed. So slow down enough to notice, but not so much that fear convinces you to stay still. Because the more you honor what you already perceive, the quieter the resistance becomes. And in that quiet direction stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like alignment you can finally inhabit. That alignment you're beginning to inhabit has a strange side effect. It turns your memory into a mirror, because once awareness sharpens, the past stops feeling random too. You start revisiting moments you once labeled as mistakes, years you quietly wish you could edit, decisions that didn't produce what you hoped they would, and here is where the ache tries to return. Chosen one, listen carefully. Those were not detours away from your calling. They were the scaffolding beneath it. You were taught to read your life linearly, success forward, failure backward. But the architecture of a God-sized dream does not move in straight lines. It layers, it reinforces, it hides its load-bearing beams until the structure can stand. That thing you call a failure taught you endurance. That rejection trained your discernment. That delay stretched your capacity to remain faithful without visibility. You didn't lose time, you gained weight. And weight matters more than speed when something is meant to last. Chosen one, if your past feels messy, it's because you're looking at raw materials instead of design. Steel looks useless until it's placed. Stone feels heavy until it supports something larger. You were not wandering, you were being reinforced. Every skill you picked up accidentally, every connection that didn't make sense at the time, every frustration that refused to resolve quickly. They weren't wasted motion. They were alignment being assembled quietly. This is why your story doesn't fit clean categories. Why you don't feel like you belong fully in one box. Why you've carried contradictory experiences that never quite merged. That complexity is intentional. A God-sized dream requires range, perspective, empathy forged through discomfort. You were never meant to be simple. You were meant to be usable. Chosen one. The shame you still carry over past missteps is the last illusion trying to keep you small. Because if you accept that even your failures were formative, then nothing about your life disqualifies you anymore. And that is terrifying, because it removes the excuse of being not ready yet. Your history is not a liability. It is proof of preparation. The architecture was being built while you thought you were falling behind. That's why certain lessons repeated, why similar challenges resurfaced in different forms. Not to punish you, to strengthen the beam. You were being taught how to carry pressure without breaking how to stand, when outcomes were uncertain, how to listen when applause was absent. Chosen one, the unseen architecture is nearly complete, which means the next phase will feel different. Less about fixing what went wrong and more about trusting that what went wrong was never outside the design. This is the moment where regret either dissolves or becomes the last thing holding you back. Because once you see your past as construction, not chaos, you stop asking, why did that happen to me? And you start asking, what am I built to hold now? That question you're now holding, what am I built to hold now, doesn't echo into the past. It presses into your present. Because the architecture you just recognized is not finished in theory. It is being stress tested in real time. And this is where many people misunderstand their current frustration. Chosen one, the pressure you feel right now is not obstruction, it is instruction. You are facing challenges that don't feel dramatic enough to justify the weight they carry, yet they drain you, stretch you, demand patience you didn't know you had. Small conflicts that linger, responsibilities that feel beneath the magnitude you sense inside, constraints that refuse to move even when you pray, plan, and prepare. This is the hidden curriculum, not lessons you sign up for, lessons you live inside. Because a God-sized dream does not arrive as an upgrade. It arrives as an expansion. An expansion always presses against the container that must hold it. That's why your frustrations are precise, targeted, persistent. They are not random irritations, they are rehearsals. You are learning how to remain steady when progress is slow, how to respond without reaction, how to lead yourself before anyone else follows. These challenges are not asking you to escape them. They are asking you to master the posture you bring into them. Chosen one, what irritates you most right now is revealing what still has power over you, not to shame you, to strengthen you, because anything that can hijack your peace would eventually distort the dream you're meant to carry. So it's being addressed early, quietly, relentlessly. This is why the work feels invisible, why no one is clapping, why the growth feels internal and unmeasurable. You are being trained for sustainability, not applause. The divine does not rush capacity, it deepens it. And the proof that this training matters is that you're still standing inside it, still choosing integrity when shortcuts exist, still showing up when disengagement would be easier, still listening when bitterness tempts you to harden. That endurance is not accidental. Chosen one, the frustrations you want removed are the very things teaching you how to carry authority without force, clarity without arrogance, and responsibility without resentment. This is the cost of being trusted, because once the dream surfaces more visibly, there will be less room for collapse, less margin for reaction, less tolerance for immaturity. So the training happens now when the stakes are low enough to survive mistakes, but high enough to shape you. Do not rush this phase. You are not being delayed. You are being weighted. And weight once added cannot be removed without weakening the structure. Chosen one, if you can honor this hidden curriculum, if you can stop resenting the quiet pressure and start learning from it, you will realize something sobering. You are not preparing for the dream anymore. You are already living inside the conditions that make it possible. That realization lands with weight. You are already living inside the conditions that make the dream possible. And once you see that, waiting becomes impossible. Because waiting implies distance. Preparation implies arrival. Chosen one, this is where the language must change. You are no longer seeking purpose. You are inhabiting it. And that shift is unsettling because it removes the comfort of postponement. When purpose lived in the future, you could imagine it without risking anything. You could protect yourself with timing, with not yet, with someday. But embodiment demands presence. It asks, who are you being right now in the smallest moments when no one is watching? This is the irreversible choice. Because once you stop waiting, your daily decisions start carrying prophetic weight. How you speak, what you tolerate, where you place your attention. These are no longer neutral habits, they are acts of co-creation. The divine does not impose destiny, it collaborates with posture, which means every alignment you honor strengthens the trajectory, and every compromise weakens it. Not dramatically, gradually. Chosen one, this is why clarity increases alongside discomfort. Because now the cost of pretending not to know is higher than the cost of change. You feel it when you almost say yes to something that no longer fits. When you're tempted to shrink for familiarity. When distraction calls your name louder than discipline. These are not tests sent to trick you. They are crossroads revealing who you are becoming. And becoming is always active. You are not asked to perform perfectly. You are asked to participate honestly, to stop separating your spiritual life from your real one, to stop treating awareness like a private experience instead of a public posture. Because a God-sized dream does not turn on and off, it integrates. Chosen one, this is the moment many quietly retreat, not because they don't believe, but because belief now requires alignment that changes how they live. But you didn't come this far to remain theoretical. You were not awakened to observe the architecture. You were awakened to inhabit it, which means the question is no longer, is this my calling? The question is, am I willing to live as if it is? Because once you begin embodying purpose, life responds differently. Opportunities carry more weight. Misalignment feels louder. Integrity becomes non-negotiable. There is no neutral ground here. Waiting keeps you safe. Embodiment makes you responsible. And responsibility is the doorway to authority. Chosen one, this is the threshold where destiny stops feeling mystical and starts feeling practical. Where the dream is no longer something you talk about, but something you carry in how you move through ordinary days. You are not co-creating the future, you are co-creating the now. And the now once lived in alignment cannot be undone. That truth from before stands firm, the now once lived in alignment cannot be undone. Because once you embody purpose, you cannot unknow who you are. Chosen one, this is the moment of sealing, not with ceremony, not with spectacle, with recognition. Your path is not waiting to begin. It has been unfolding beneath your feet the entire time. And now that you see it, neutrality is gone. You are no longer choosing between belief and disbelief. You are choosing between obedience and delay, because denial after recognition is not ignorance. It is refusal. This is where the weight sharpens. The signs will not disappear, but they will change tone. What once whispered will now press. What once invited will now insist, not to punish you, to honor what you have already been trusted with. Chosen one, this is why the dream feels heavier now than it did when it was distant. Distance made it romantic. Proximity makes it real. Real requires consistency, integrity, embodiment when no one applauds. You can no longer pretend your life is random. You can no longer treat your days as rehearsal. Every ordinary moment now carries consequence because it either aligns with the architecture or resists it. And resistance does not stop destiny. It only makes it more painful to carry later. This is the sobering truth most people never hear. The dream does not leave you if you hesitate. It waits. And waiting under awareness is heavier than never knowing at all. Chosen one, you were not chosen for comfort. You were chosen for coherence, for the ability to live integrated without splitting your inner knowing from your outward life. This is why you've been pulled toward simplicity, toward honesty, toward shedding what no longer fits, not because you are losing options, but because clarity demands alignment. You are becoming someone whose life speaks before your words do. And that is the consequence. Because once your life carries that kind of signal, it affects others. It disrupts patterns. It exposes what is hidden. And that responsibility cannot be set down again. Chosen one, your path is already unfolding. Not as an idea, as a lived reality. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where recognition demands response. And whatever you choose from here will echo forward with the same precision that guided you to this moment. You feel it now, the quiet after the ceiling, not emptiness, stillness. This is not the end of the message. It is the place where the message finally rests inside you. Chosen one, nothing new needs to be added here, only remembered. Because the most dangerous mistake now would be to leave this moment thinking something dramatic must follow, that tomorrow must look different immediately, that proof must arrive quickly. No, the power of what you've recognized is not in how fast you move next, but in how honestly you return to your life, to your morning routines, your conversations, your work, your silences, with new eyes. You are not being asked to perform your destiny. You are being asked to inhabit it, which means the invitation now is subtle but absolute, live coherently. Let your choices agree with what you know. Let your attention align with what you value. Let your boundaries reflect what you're carrying. That is how the God-sized dream breathes through ordinary days. Do not rush to explain this to anyone. Do not rush to label it. Do not rush to turn it into content plans or identity statements. What you've received needs time to integrate, because dreams of this weight are not activated by announcement. They are activated by consistency. Chosen one, there will be days soon when this clarity feels quieter than you expect. Not because it faded, but because it settled, like weight finding its place. On those days, resist the urge to doubt. Doubt usually arrives disguised as practicality, as reason, as be realistic. But realism without recognition is just another way to forget. Instead, anchor yourself in what has already been shown. Remember how the ache made sense once you stopped fighting it. Remember how patterns became clear once you slowed down. Remember how your past reassembled itself into preparation, not failure. Those truths do not evaporate because life continues. They mature, and maturity rarely announces itself with emotion. It expresses itself through steadiness. This is where the real work begins, and it will not look impressive from the outside. It will look like integrity when compromise is easier, like patience when reaction would feel justified, like quiet obedience to what you know even when no one is watching. That is how the architecture holds. Chosen one, if you ever feel the urge to go back to waiting, to postpone alignment until conditions improve, pause. Waiting now would not protect you, it would only divide you. And division is heavier than responsibility. You were not given this recognition to feel special. You were given it to live whole. Whole enough that your life no longer contradicts your inner knowing. Whole enough that your days stop leaking energy into resistance. Whole enough that your presence carries clarity without needing to persuade. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about stopping the quiet self-betrayals that kept the dream hidden longer than necessary. Chosen one, the dream is not asking for your exhaustion. It is asking for your agreement. Agreement between who you are becoming and how you show up when it costs you something. Agreement between your insight and your habits. Agreement between the sacred and the mundane. And when that agreement holds, peace follows, not because everything is easy, but because nothing is split. You are not walking toward destiny anymore. You are walking with it, step by step, day by day, ordinary moment by ordinary moment. That is how God-sized things move through human lives. Quietly, faithfully, irreversibly.